I mean, one of them was almost 7 feet tall, and the other three were little grays. And then they were gone, so I just covered my blanket, and I never did see them again until 2009. We moved around a lot. We ended up in Seagoville, Texas in 1956. And that's when I was first abducted. When I first saw aliens, they didn't really take me out of my room, but I don't know what they did. I saw them, though, consciously and remembered it. And I told my mother about it, and I called her in my room 2 different times. And the third time she came in, she said, if they come back, don't call me. You're going to have to learn to deal with them yourself. They're just going to be gone when I get here. And I didn't know what was going on. We had, in 1956, you didn't hear anything about aliens.
No.
So anyway, I covered my head up with the blanket. Well, they actually showed up after she left the room. That was the third time they came in. And I saw them. They were really strange. It didn't really scare me, but it was just weird. I mean, one of them was almost 7 feet tall, and the other three were little grays. And then they were gone. And I covered my head with my blanket, and I decided if they were going to come back, which I thought they might because of what my mom said, I didn't want to see them. So I just covered my blanket, and I never did see them again until 2009.
So, okay, let's back up a little bit. So it was 1954, is that right? Or is that when you were born?
50 is when I was born.
You were born in... So, okay, so when you saw them, how old were you?
You were about 6 years old when this happened.
Yes, because we had moved to Seagoville during the summer. My birthday was before the summer, and I started school in September.
Okay, wow. So can you describe, you said there was one that was 7 feet tall, and then you mentioned that the others were kind of like your typical grays, and I'm assuming we can all paint that picture, right? But can you describe the one that was tall? Like, was it similar to that one but bigger, or was it a different complexion? Was it not gray? Can you describe the way it looked?
He looked like Captain Hook from Peter Pan.
So he was dressed.
He looked like he had... Okay, they can control your perceptions. They can make you see whatever they want you to see. And they knew, because they can read your mind, they had probably seen me before. They probably were the ones that kept me from dying of cancer. So they made me see my favorite cartoon character, which was Captain Hook. And I saw him mostly in the book Peter Pan. He had a big wide hat. Now, he was probably a mantis creature, and the mantis has a big wide head with 2 big eyes, and they usually wear a robe, which signifies they have rank. Well, he was wearing what looked like a pirate captain's coat, but that was probably the robe. They just picked that, and he moved around the room, and he walked really weird, but I couldn't see his legs because the room was mostly
Well, you were
dark.
laying in bed, right? Probably freaking out.
I was laying in
so
bed.
right out of the gate of life, you had this experience.
So how did that influence your path? Now, I know that as you create music, a lot of it, you draw a lot of your creative force and your inspiration for the music that you write from these experiences. Is that correct?
No. But it is their fault that I make music. I mean, I wanted to be in a rock band in the 60s, and I had a rock band for 2 years, and then we got to arguing right after we did our first gig, and we broke up, and that was it. And then we all left Seagoville and went to college in different towns. But in 2011 or 12, I had been meditating for several years, and I used a CD from a company that it was sort of ambient music, and it had an entrainment track underneath it that could put you into an altered state of consciousness, different brain waves like theta, or I can't remember right now. Anyway, I listened to that every day. You couldn't hear it, but it had a rhythm, a very steady rhythm, or a frequency.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
That affected your brain.
Right.
And Zygon was the company that made it. They don't make them anymore. They do something else now. But I had listened to this thing several hundred times, and I got into a really deep trance, and suddenly this music starts playing, and it sounded like orchestral instruments, but they were playing like we play synthesizers in experimental music. There was no melody. There was these noises, but they were perfect, and it was really beautiful. And I listened to it, and suddenly it caught my attention so much, I didn't think anything until it was suddenly over, and I went, that's not on the CD. And I was using headphones, and it was coming straight through my headphones. Now, they could have been playing it in my head, just the way they did in 56. And I had already seen them because I saw them again in 2009, which is when a friend of mine told me, hey, you've told me all these things that happened to you. Your life's been saved 8 times. You were hit by a car and it didn't hurt you, but it destroyed. And this was in 61. It destroyed a steel bicycle, but it didn't destroy you at all. All these different things. And he said, and I had just seen a few days earlier, I had seen a portal open up over North Street in Nacogdoches, Texas, like in the Kurt Russell movie Stargate, except it had no frame around it. And he said, well, I know what's going on. And I said, what is it? And he said, do you want to know? And I said, yeah. And he said, do you really want to know? Because once I tell you, there's not any unknowing it. And I said, yeah, what is it? And he said, you're an alien abductee. And I said, you're crazy. And I had taken him a drawing because I'd had an experience recently, a dream, I thought. And it had this creature in it, the mantis creature, which I had never heard of at that point in time. I had drawn it down before I got out of bed the next morning. And I showed it to him, and he turned around and he turned on the computer and looked at a web page that he'd looked at often, and there was a picture of the exact same thing. And then he told me to go home. He told me to go home and look up these 2 web pages and look at these questions that were on there. So I went and looked them up, and they both had 99 questions. And if you answered most of them, you were probably an alien abductee and you should find more help. So I answered the 99 questions, and the only ones that I didn't answer yes were the ones that were specifically for women. So at that point...
So you got help then, or?
I looked for somebody in Texas that could help me, and I found a man named Gerald Sims who calls himself the Alien Hunter, and he investigates claims of people who have been abducted. And I met several other people,